Julie Murphy here, and I am the Money Chick, and today we're going to show you how things work themselves out or act them out, and they do it through their money, through your health, or your relationships. And we're going to tie this together for you because guess what? 'Tis the season to be generous, but don't do it at the cost of yourself. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like, and that notification bell so you know every time Rita and I are coming live because guess what? We're here to help you get to exactly the life that you desire to live. So, Rita, here we go. On my birthday, nonetheless.
Oh, that's true. I forgot. I sat there thinking, wow, Julie's got it really amped up today. And then you reminded me once again that it was your birthday. I'm like, well, of course she'd be amped up. I mean, I'd be over the moon. I just have to ask.
Go ahead.
I just want to know what you're going to do for yourself for your birthday.
So, in the whole topic of that love solves all, like even if we're in our money patterns or our relationship patterns, if you default to love, that is a solution for everything. So I actually decided that me, my kids, boyfriend and his two kids, so that's 2 adults, 6 children, are getting on an airplane today, and we are going to go see the Cirque du Soleil Love Show.
Oh, wow. I haven't seen that one yet. That is so exciting. Where are you flying to see it? Vegas?
Yeah, so we are heading to Vegas. Yeah, and we are going to crack those little hearts open that we have traveling with us. And yeah, I saw this show about 10 years ago, and if anyone's ever not seen it, it really, if you need an uplift or something to move some of the energy inside you to get to a more loving space, no matter what you're suffering that you're going through right now, this show will do it. It really, you cannot, I've seen grown men in there tear up.
Really?
It's really just an absolute beautiful show. And so that is how I pick them up from school today and we head off out west. So very excited.
That's just so generous of you because for example, like I don't have kids, and I tend to be a little more self-absorbed about things. I tend to be a little bit more like, what makes me feel good? And it, and so on my birthday, I tend to be more generous with like my physical body. And I'd be like, no, I'm going to a spa and everybody's leaving me alone. And I'm going to finally get, more time to plug into the divine. And I've always admired who have such a generous spirit that they really want to celebrate with other people. They really want to celebrate with their family. They don't want to go in the opposite direction of like, oh no, I'm celebrating with me.
It's funny. I get that because I remember that was something I learned from my ex-husband actually, that we all do it differently because he would always like to have like the one part of his day to his own time and his own peace and his own quiet. And then we get together for dinner or something. And to me, I was kind of like, what? Like, I didn't understand that. But it's okay that we all have a different definition, right? It's about, we always talk about that. If you're following your own heart and what I like to call your giggle, follow the giggle. And if it makes you giggle, then that's where it's expansive for you. And that's where you evolve. And that's where you get to a better place in your own life. And it's okay that it's different or it's not the way somebody else does it.
And that's the thing that trips most women up is we keep thinking we have to be somebody else without realizing that we have to be ourselves. And when we're generous with ourselves first, when we say, what do I really need? Where do I really need to go? I mean, before we came on camera, you and I were talking about, okay, how are we going to get to the King's Spa? Because this is a critically important thing to do. How do we get to the spa? This is important. And women aren't taught to think that way. They aren't taught to think about, oh, I don't have to live in an emotional desert. I don't have to starve myself until I'm toothpick thin. I don't have to sacrifice my own mental health because it makes me a better woman.
Well, and we talked about that. It's funny. I have an awful lot of people that come to me as a financial planner and they'll say, because I always make sure there are what I call reward buckets set up of money. And the reason I do that is because of the fact that I need everybody to. I'm fixing our screen here. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
There we go. I was
Yay!
like, why is that not
I
right?
don't mind being small, but that's okay.
Sorry about that. I'm like,
Lily, it's her birthday. It's her birthday.
yeah, so I get a little space. That didn't feel very collaborative. That felt very patriarchy. Hello, I'm big and huge, and I'm going to keep you small.
And I didn't mind. I was just going to play it out.
I want everybody to see that this is how fast you can change the energy of not only your household, your community, your country, and the world. It's that easy. Just click another button, and then you're collaborative and you're working with people as opposed to trying to dominate and be small. That is all you need to learn today, and here you go.
Isn't it wonderful how life brings us lessons and all sorts of funny little packages? And when we're open to them and we laugh about them and we have generosity and compassion for ourselves,
For sure.
it gives us the ability to have generosity and compassion for other people. I mean, I just sat there going, wow, this is really funny. I wonder what this looks like.
Yeah.
You know, I was like a Lilliputian, you know?
Yeah. Thanks for coming along, Rita. I'm
No
just going to keep you down there, though.
Yeah, I thought it was hilarious, but I'm like, hey, this is cool. Let's see where it goes.
Yeah, well, so since I digressed when I realized that I was holding you small, but you know what? We were talking about the fact that, Rita, honey, I've been wanting to tell you, you matter, sweetheart.
Oh my God, thank you. Oh my God.
No, but I mean, this is where, when I set people up, I have them, I always talk about a concept that when you find newfound money, and that might be a raise or a client that came out of nowhere, or could be a tax return, could be a bonus, could be an inheritance. Like, it's money that you're not currently operating on. Because usually when you go to a financial planner, they say, okay, here's the money you have, here's the income you have, you need to cut all these things out and do this. Well, who the hell wants to cut anything out?
Oh, nobody does. And I don't agree with that at all. I never agree with cutting things out.
Right. And so when the topic for today is generosity, right? So if we're generous, if you will, with ourselves, we have to have reward. Excuse me. Pardon me.
Bless you.
Thank you. We have to have reward buckets. And so I always talk about a third, that when you get this newfound money, take a third of it and pay off your past. Take a third of it, plant the seeds for the future that you want to create. And the other third, I call it your Pissaway Fund. I mean, but it's about, where do you want to spend money to feel good today? So it's like the spa you were talking about. Mm-hmm. Like, I've had women tell me, and this was more of like older generations, but, oh no, my nails aren't clean enough to have somebody go work on my nails. I'm like, well, the whole purpose of going to get your nails done is for somebody to do that for you. And it's like they feel like they're not enough because they're embarrassed that they chew their fingernails and they don't want somebody else working on them to see that about themselves. It's like, well, it's already there. But we have all this stuff where we are not generous with ourselves. And I am here to tell you, like, if you say, well, I'm going to go do it, but if you do it with debt, you're actually punishing yourself when you're doing it with debt. You're not rewarding yourself. You're bullshitting yourself that you're rewarding yourself, but you're really actually punishing yourself because you're creating more suffering for yourself, because you can't live in the present moment when you're paying for the past. And this is where the spa, like you're talking about, that we need to, because again, we work things out and we act it out through our health, through our money, and through our relationships. And, Rita, you and I have talked plenty of times that, it's also being generous with yourself, holding healthy boundaries in your relationships, right?
Yes. And allowing the things that you value to matter. Mm-hmm. It's not so much that we have a Pissaway Fund, as much as now, in my mind, you have power to influence your life and the lives of others. Now, how do you want to use this?
Right.
And so whether it's investing in yourself in a class you want to take, joining masterclass and learning how to cook, or what, we look at where we spend this money. Are we
Right.
spending it to distract ourselves from the pain that we're in, or are we using it to nourish our souls in some way so that we've got the resources in order to make changes in other areas of our life, like our relationships or
Right.
like our health?
Right. Well, and it's about you know, so I just talked to a client about this week. I was explaining one of my patterns, which really integrated relationship and money. That, a few years back, I had a 2-year-old niece who had died. And when she passed, um, I was in a situation where I was able to help pay for the funeral costs.
Mm-hmm.
And um, I realized one of my patterns that was up was that I was again exchanging money to try to get more love. So that's where my relationship and my money stuff, because I'm a manifesting generator according to the human design model. And I can manifest money all over the place. Like, it's super easy for me to do that. And but then I would use that money because of my not enough button to then go, okay, I'll help you out because I can generate all this, but then you need to love me back. And this was a pattern that I didn't realize for years. And then when I started to realize it and I started to heal that in my life, and this happens to everybody, is that we're then tested, right? We're tested in our relationships, we're tested on our money. So this was both for me. And so then I was trying to find resolution. And this is where the generous part comes into play, is that I was trying to find resolution. How do I still be generous to my sister in a very bad time in her life, but yet also be true to me? And this is where you can be generous to yourself. It's not that you cut the other things off, because the way I couldn't wire it in my head was, but I'm a giver. I've always been a giver. I've always like helped people out. And how do I solve that? Right? And so to me, it was about, how do I get in better resolution with myself in the exchanging money for love piece? And then so what I had done is I found the solution that I'm really good at generating. So I set up a GoFundMe page when GoFundMe first came out, and we generated, almost $50,000 in 6 days. And it helped with the medical bills, it helped with the funeral costs, it helped with everything. And so this is where that was still extremely generous. It was more than what I was initially asked, which was to help with the funeral cost. And this is where we all have our version of that incidents, where we have to make sure we include ourselves along the way.
Right. And something that really struck me is when you said you wanted to be generous, but you also wanted to be true to yourself.
Right.
And energetically, that almost feels like like an adversarial point of view. It's either you or me. And
Well,
what I
that's why I
like,
think so many of us do it. I mean, that's the way religion is set up, right? It's like, give away the ranch to everybody else and you keep what you have left over. Like, I
right,
know that's what it
right.
felt like in Catholic church, and otherwise you got all this guilt and shame, and this is why these patterns are so ingrained in many of us, because then we feel guilty if we don't. And like, I'm having those conversations with people every day about it's acting out in their money. I had another client recently just say to me, Jewel, the holidays are terrible because it's all about the money and the gifts, and it's lists that people just handed everybody. And like, we're a super wealthy family, and my parents grew it. They're the grandparents now. And but it's all become about the money. Like, okay, we want this money to pass to us, so give me this toy, this da, 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 da. And there's the love is missing because we're forgetting about ourselves along the way. So I had challenged her to actually, I go, okay, so what can you do to break up that pattern when you go to your parents' house? So as we come into the holidays, or even, it doesn't necessarily even have to be holiday season, or you're going to a family event, How do you align more with your heart to be generous to yourself? And just know that some people may shift and some people may not. But I can tell you this, most people are starving for the shift and they just don't know how to get there.
You know, it reminds me when I would get into fights with people, and it takes a lot to get me in a fight, because I'm super empathic and physical, and I don't like to be uncomfortable, and too
Maybe
much.
that's how we balance each other off.
Oh yeah, too much
Super easy for me to
adrenaline,
go
and
there.
I'm uncomfortable, and no. So it takes a lot to pull me into a fight, and so I spent the majority of my life not getting angry about things and not standing up for things,
Right.
but then feeling hurt because the other person would. So the other person would come at me, and then I'd feel small and I wouldn't react and I wouldn't be pulled into the fight. And, I'd find all these coping skills not to fight.
Sure.
But I kept getting hurt over and over because it was an unfair power play.
Yeah.
And when I realized that if I was fighting back and I was saying things back, I couldn't hear the other person, which was kind of good.
That's true, right?
Because I could finally say the things that needed to come off my heart while not being hurt at the same time, because I was too busy being angry back. And it was it's a balancing act. And so I found when we find ourselves wanting to be generous to other people, when we at the same time say, and how can I be generous with myself? The more generous you are with yourself, the more generous you can be with other people. It increases your capacity to give and receive. So if we start with that self-generosity, where do we not have love?
Yep. Well, and that's part of the divine feminine energy, right? So receiving is the divine feminine, as opposed to pushing and pushing yourself into it, right? So one of the things that I've realized is that most of us are not open to receive the level that we know we have the capacity to do in the world. And whatever that is, whether it's in your capacity to love, but you have to love yourself before you can get to the capacity for the love of others. Right. And that's no different than money. Like, if you're not people, when I have people create, sorry, the sun is having,
you know what? You should move, even if you get your angel wings, because now the sun is making you look, washed out. Yes. Like you glow like the angel you are.
Oh, listen to you.
This is how I think. People think that I'm full of crap a lot of times. But this is how I legitimately think about the world. I love myself. I like everything about me. When I used to go to Cirque du Soleil, but you go to the Love one. You know what I go to? I go to the one that was like everybody's naked. That's the Cirque du Soleil that I go to, and then I get fascinated with how people's bodies move and their muscles and what they can do, and I can watch everything shift, and I'm just fascinated by that stuff. And so I learned a long time ago that loving myself is the only way for health and happiness and balance. And so I really love myself, and the things that I don't like, I find ways to love.
Well, because if you don't, how does somebody else love you if you don't love yourself?
Right. And so when I look at you in the sunshine and sorting out your life, when I look at you, I feel this tremendous amount of love for you. Because I see you, because I see me, and if I love me, I love you. And so it's a natural outpouring, and it's from that generosity to self that fountains over like a fountain of gold, onto the golden light, onto the people around us in our vicinity, as well as the people that we're energetically attached to and connected to, family, as well as anyone who's touched us in our
Right.
life, that
Right.
web, we raise the field.
Well, and anyone needs to just watch some of Greg Braden's stuff on, if you want to understand the science behind it, right, of how this all works.
Right. And I
Um,
did watch the one you recommended, and explaining the quantum field, and I loved it, and how we manifest. I loved it.
yeah, because to me, when people try to argue with me against some of this stuff, I'm like, okay, just go look at the science now. And I go to that this is how our cell phones work. They're not connected by a cord, and you can still call China, right?
Yes.
And we as human beings do the same thing. And so whatever you are feeling or doing, so if you're not receiving, then people can't receive what you're trying to give.
Yes, and you don't have
And
anything to give, and you're a stagnant pool and obese, and either energetically or physically, it's too much waste.
right. Well, and I pointed this out to two of my kids recently that the one was just, she is at that age where you could potentially be exposed to a lot of body shaming, right?
Oh yeah.
And so then some of that started to come into my house, and I was like, yeah, no. And she goes, well, I don't have any hangups because I'm not wearing it on my physical body like she is. And I was like, no, but can I point out where yours is at? And it's in all that crap around your bed and your dresser. And like, it's like a tornado hit it. And I'm like, we all do it differently, but it's still unprocessed emotions.
And
And
that's the lesson. That's the lesson.
right.
Is we all do this differently, so we need to stop trying to be like other people and just accept the fact that we do it differently and defend that right to do
Yep.
it differently, so we can be the best version of ourselves and contribute to the world as a whole in a positive way.
Right. And the only way you can do that is by building the muscle in trusting your own knowing. And again, this is your knowing. Okay, so Rita, you and I talk about this, that some of these spiritual teachers talk about some of this stuff and it's so esoteric. It's like, well, that's great, but how do I do
Right,
that in my
right,
world? Right? How do I do that? And
right.
so how
While you're
you
on
do
the Peloton, while you're sweaty, while your kids are screaming, and while school was canceled again.
did you know that that's what happened in my world this week? No.
I'm
But
psychic in some ways. I do read minds.
it's true. But that's why I keep it as simple as follow your giggle. I'm like, or the other one when people like look at me going, because I'm talking about money, so people don't really align giggling with money, and so I'm like, all right, so maybe it's not a giggle of money, but I'm like, which one just feels lighter? I want you to say both options verbally out loud, and then which one feels lighter, and that's the one I want you to go with. And they always know which one feels lighter. I was listening to a scientist the other day that was talking about how our physical bodies actually have, you know, thousands of years of DNA tracking in our cells. So our bodies and our minds do not have those cells. They're in our physical body. So we have to understand that our heart is regulates the body, and our mind regulates our ego, and it it's like our personality as opposed to our soul, if you will.
Now, I want you to
Um,
say that all again, because it needs to be said again, and I didn't quite even follow that.
Got it. Okay. So our mind is the masculine energy, it's the ego, it's our personality. It's like our humanity, if you will, right?
Okay, how we identify ourselves, like
How
our
we
sun
plug
sign.
into how we plug into the 3D world, right?
Got it.
Our hearts, that's the feminine energy. It's the place where our knowing is. It's the place where our body intelligence is giving us our guide, right? And it's based on our soul. So it's our higher self as opposed to our ego personality self. So our personalities,
most people think our higher self is in our head. Is the voice
no,
we hear in our head is our higher self, but
it's in
it's
our heart.
really the voice and the feeling we have in our heart.
Right.
That's our higher self. That's how I do body work.
Yep.
When I do it hands-on, in person, hands-on work, it's the same sort of thing. I'm down in my body and my body tells me what I need to work on and how to
Yep.
tweak it to get
Yep.
exactly the right place in exactly the right way.
Yep. And so when I'm telling people to follow their body intelligence, sometimes people are so in their heads, especially if you're highly educated, that's when it gets like, because you've reasoned everything out so far in your life, but that's what actually hits you up to a glass ceiling because you're still operating from that um, personality self, from the projected self. So the projected self is your um, trauma or your rejection, which is all the work you do, right? In
Yeah.
helping people get through
Yes.
that.
Shattering that false ego.
Right. So when somebody's really in their mind and really in that ego personality place, I'm like, I'll even say this, like, I have this one client, he's like this 300-pound dude. He's just huge. He's like 6'8", like he's just big. And I was
Like
like,
a mountain. I
yeah,
love
I'm
working
like,
with
would
mountain.
you play with me for a minute? And he's like, excuse me? And I'm like, would you play with me for just a second? And he's like, sure. And I go, will you close your eyes? He's like, close my eyes. I'm like, you said you'd play. And he goes, all right. Now, this is a client I've had for a while. So he was willing to trust me because he knows. So because he's an executive. So he's way in his head and he's made a lot of money. And he's been uber successful, but wow, there's other stuff going on. Right. And I have to unplug him from the job that has been his definition for his life all these years. Because on paper, he has enough money to quit and he wants to quit. He just doesn't know how to quit. And so I had him literally take a deep breath in because, as you know, that puts us back into our bodies, right? So when he closed his eyes, I had him breathe in, and then I had him, and I go blow it out. And as he was blowing it out, I asked him a question. I'm like, "How do you feel about this?" And then he would tell me. I'm like, "Okay, let's do it again." And then I chose the other option. He very clearly knew which was the right path because he physically felt it in his own body. And
See, and this
I told him, I said, your mind's going to try to negotiate that away because you don't know how to choose that option. You knew how to choose the second option because it was the easier path. And I'm grateful that he trusted me and he kept going down, that particular road. And it's been great. And he's unpacking it.
and that's what we're supposed to be doing.
Right.
The thing I'm most excited about, and I know it's going to happen someday, is I'll know that I will have made an impact when I'm coaching at least one, if not more, senators. Because this stuff is so important on how to regulate your nervous system and how to get out of your head and into your body and how to get your body
Right.
and your mind and your heart aligned and how to build your resources and your influence and your ability to create.
Yep.
This is so important that I need to be talking to people who have influence so that they can influence the people that follow them. They can make new laws. We can
Totally.
influence other countries. We can
Totally.
change the mental and emotional health of our families around the world by understanding and influencing people in order to calm themselves down. I work with Democrats, Republicans, atheists, Catholics, because it's all the same thing.
Yep.
And I believe when people are in their aligned self,
Yep.
then they will make good decisions like you showed with your exec.
Right.
When you're in your aligned self, you will make good decisions. When you are not in your aligned self, you will make bad decisions.
Yeah, and going back to the fact that we don't even know that we're out of alignment. So I will have people that have been like, "Well, I have plenty of money in my accounts and I'm rocking and rolling, I'm doing it." but they don't even realize that it could be even better. The people who have a bunch of debt and who are struggling cash flow wise, they know it can be better. That's super clear to them. But I always talk about that people are either poor, debtors, dreamers, accumulators, or rich but empty. And the reason I categorize people there because that happiness quotient, which is, i.e., I'm aligned perfectly with my soul quotient, is off no matter how many dollars you have or no matter how good of a relationship you have, right? Like it's interwove into everything and they're not separate. So you start
No.
fixing it on one avenue. Like on some people would say, Jewel, well, that's all great, but you started to fix your relationship and then you wound up divorced and 50% of your money went out the door. And a bunch of your compensation for the next 9 years is going out the door too. But I always tell people when you do that and you align, more money comes to you. Do you know it's 3 years later and the profitability of my company is triple what it was 3 years ago? Triple. But you could focus on the fact that all this money went out the door because I got divorced. But it was actually, as it was falling apart, it was really actually falling together.
Or you could focus on how you avoid getting cancer and having your body destroy itself and your family implode and
Yeah.
your children become drug addicts.
Yeah. That happened too. That was certainly one of the options on the table. Yeah, for those of you who don't know, like I had gotten a lump in my breast back in 2016. And I was like, no, I teach this stuff. I don't need to act it out in my health. I'm like, what do I need to address? I had no idea at the time it was my marriage. No idea. I didn't realize how my trauma in my childhood was meeting his trauma in his childhood. And it was like Clash of the Titans. But it was all underneath the surface. None
And
of it was like
inevitable.
blatant in your face.
And it was inevitable on
Correct.
on a level. It was karmic because there were things that you did not understand. And there was, when I was in college, I was very naive. I really didn't know what could happen. But thank God I had friends that would say, things can happen, be safe.
Right.
But I mean, if it would have, if I didn't have friends, it would have been very easy for me to be prey without ever knowing. And that's what happens in life. Without knowing who we are and exploring different sides of ourselves, we walk into situations and we don't know how to handle it and we don't even know it exists. And then we get eaten up by the lion.
Right.
So there's nothing we can do except try to learn about ourselves and love ourselves as fast as possible.
Right.
So that we can avoid these horrible outcomes that we know can happen.
Right.
I was just thinking about Western medicine the other day and how unkind and cruel it was decades ago.
Right.
And how much more compassionate it is now and how much more we understand what affects it and how to make it better. And, we really have to become kinder, gentler versions of ourselves.
Right. Yeah, because it can be easy. It doesn't have to, we don't have to call the crisis in of the full blown breast cancer. We don't have to call in the crisis of, bankruptcy or divorce, 50% of the money going out the door. Now, I'm really clear. I understand my soul agreement with my ex husband, and he has allowed me the space to become the highest version of myself. And for whatever reason, his soul signed up to play that role for me, and it's worked like a charm. And when you can see it from that place, doesn't feel good as you're going through things, as you're growing, because a lot of times where we and I was this too, that he needs to change, that needs to change, da, 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 da. But it was just like, oh, when I finally realized that if I show up differently, then he shows up differently, and vice versa, everything shifts. Now it doesn't shift overnight because you can fall back in your old patterns. And it's like, again, I always tell people it's like building a muscle. Learning to plug into the world from your conscious mind and not your subconscious patterning is like building a muscle. And just allow yourself the space. I keep telling my kids, I'm like, can you please hold the space for each other to learn? My daughter said to me the other day, well, Mom, you didn't fix your stuff before you trained me, and so mine's all locked in, and so you're the reason that I'm like, ooh, preteen. You gotta love preteen. And then I was like,
Wow.
yes, but this is great. It's like a lab class, and we're learning as we go, and how fabulous that I can now teach you something different. I said, so when are you gonna get on board? And she looked at me, she goes, really? I was like, yeah.
She forgets that her mother is a multi-million-dollar entrepreneurial businesswoman who's negotiated with the toughest, most egomaniacal, self-absorbed sharks on the planet. She doesn't stand a chance. I don't care if she's your daughter. Right now, she is still smaller than you and does not stand a chance.
And you know what? Here's the thing. That's a good mirror, right? It was the test. How good have you built that muscle, Jewel? And now can you explain this in a way where you're not triggered? Because if I was still feeling not enough inside, I would have like wanted to shut her down and shut her up. But I could sit there and I go, you're right. Thank you for mirroring that back to me. And guess what? We have all this opportunity now. And she was just like, because my nervous system wasn't hijacked anymore. It's like what you said earlier, that when you create the space in your nervous systems, then you can be the observer and not the reactor to everything that goes on in your life.
Right.
Everything.
Right.
Financially.
And the only way to create the space is to give yourself the space. I've got a rule of thumb, and people look at me like, why didn't I think of that? But if you want to feel better, you have to do things that make you feel better.
Yeah, you do.
You've got to stop doing things that make you feel bad and do the things that make you feel better if you want to feel better.
So true.
You
but
know?
it's that thing. Didn't you bring a stat on one time where you're saying like to shift the negative is like 3 times as hard as shifting being in the positive?
Oh, I don't remember that, but I might have. I love that stuff.
I mean, it is like that's where that whole thing of misery loves company comes up, right? It's like it's you showing up every day, doing it differently and doing it differently, doing it differently. And it was like I was telling you, like I've been laying this foundation and shifting it all. And I get so excited when I hit another quantum leap. And this week has been full of those quantum leaps. I mean, this is what happens when you align with your soul. It's so important to just hold the intention for what it is that you want to create because you are the creator of your life, financially, in your relationships, as well as your health. You've created 100% of everything. And when I was sitting there, it was hilarious. I was doing the stuff with my business, laying the foundation, knowing what I was going to create. And I got a call this week that this woman tried to sell her business to this other place, and all the financing went through. And she's got a son in the business, and he comes with the package. Turns out she uses the exact same vendors I do. It is going to double the size of my business.
Congratulations. Happy birthday. Nice manifesting.
What a great birthday present.
Nice job. Look at what you did. Look at what you created in your life. That's amazing.
This is what happens. This is how it happens, right? Like you just tune in, you hold the intention of everything you want to create, and then it all falls into alignment. It may not come in your timing. Like I thought this was supposed to happen 6 years ago. But I didn't realize when I set that intention, all the clearing out I had to do 6 years ago. It's okay.
And it takes a lot of time.
Yeah, it is. So any other generous tips? We're here at our time now, and I'm so grateful to spend the first part of my birthday with you today.
I send every blessing to you from my heart. That this next year is the most abundant, peaceful, exciting, amazing, over the top kind of experience that you've ever had, and that your family is happy and healthy, and that your friends are happy and healthy, and everyone around you, their lives get better. That's my blessing for you for this next year.
Mwah. Thanks, Rita.
Yep.
And how do people get a hold of you? Because I know you can help them untangle their relationship stuff.
Oh, yeah. Go to YouTube, type in Rita Hickman. Go to Facebook, type in Rita Hickman. You will find me. Go to ritahickmancoaching.com. I've been around for a while, so I've mapped the landscape of you've mapped it with money, and I've mapped it with relationships. So
Totally.
I'm easy to find, and people can just reach out, and I'll usually get back within a day or two.
Perfect. And make sure you hit that subscribe button and that notification bell and like so that we know or you know when we are back on because we are here to get you to a life that you love. Thanks,
Absolutely.
everybody.
Love you.
Love
Bye.
you too. Bye.
Well, congrats.